forgot I was listening to this too.
Nothing less. And yet Western civilization is a frantic denial of this. From the calendar to our organizations by which we rule ourselves, to our approach to medicine, to the promises of our religion, we seek that which endures. And the absence of it in the real universe makes us neurotic. And so there has to be a coming to terms with the flow and an embracing of it. It was interesting to me that when we went around the circle last night, so many people were body people, I guess because of the rollover from the massage workshop. The felt experience of being is the core fact of reality for each one of us. The experience of the mind in the body in the moment. And you're born into that. And then, whether you're Hasidic Jew or Witoto or Chinese, your culture
to a place that's pretty
holds up a distorted mirror to that experience of in the body,
like this for years.
the mind in the body in the moment. And some different take is culturally downloaded into you. And this, I think, is what we have to recover. For instance, in our society, it's very hierarchical. Truth is handed down to us through Time Magazine, Scientific American, Physical Review letters, Mondo 2000. I mean, it depends on where you're getting your truth, but it's handed down. And so we are consumers of experience and authenticity. You know, to find out what's real, we read, we watch, and we listen. And yet, to find out what's real, you need to turn the perception inward and feel. The Western thing is a peculiarly now denying cultural style. You know, very, very much obsessed with the past, the lessons of the past, the direction of the past, and very much concerned with future gratifications that lie further and further outside the van of the moment. And the moment simply becomes this hairline transition from one to the other. Somebody once said of my great-grandfather, where he'd been was so-so, where he was hell, and where he was going was paradise. This is an Irish problem that can be generally extended to the human race, I think. Yeah.
People who appreciate psychedelics is, and do you think it's growing? And do you think there's some part of the world that's more receptive to it than others in the modern world, in the developed countries?
Well, as to how many people there are, it's very hard to say because, you know, we could be generous and say that everybody who's ever taken a psychedelic drug and everybody who's ever had a near-death experience and every woman who has given birth without anesthesia and so forth, that this is the huge pool of psychedelic people. Or we could take a less generous view and say that most people who've taken psychedelics have not really discovered what we're talking about. Almost utterly absent in the old world tropics, which have an equally complex climaxed flora, for instance, out in eastern Indonesia. So you might, and I do have great respect for the style of shamanism, psychedelic shamanism, that exists in Peru and Colombia, which is the shaman, the paye, the curandero, who makes plant preparations, takes them with his or her patients, voyages with them, and cures. Now, in the same way that we import exotic ethno-pharmacological activities into this country, the same thing has happened in Brazil. There are religions based on ayahuasca, but I am very suspicious of large groups of people taking drugs together because, you know, I'm very aware that the way you control people with drugs or period, is to give them small amounts of drugs along with large helpings of your message. And so I don't like dosing small doses, and I don't like theologies. One of the things I was thinking about last night after the talk was how I think several people, as we went around last night, said that they were into spiritual growth. And we always come to that place in here because I'm a great spokesman for psychedelics and have logged a considerable amount of time out there. And I consider myself utterly ordinary in the realm of spiritual growth. I'm not even sure that, strictly speaking, psychedelics have anything directly to do with that. I'm pretty old-fashioned when it comes to the concept of spiritual growth. Here's how you attain spiritual growth. Visit the sick and imprisoned, bury the dead, clothe the naked, feed the hungry. It has nothing to do with mantras, yantras, shastras, tantras, or any of that. It has to do with ethical behavior and moral feeling for one's fellow human being. And, you know, if you've been visiting cancer wards recently, I admit you haven't seen me there carrying out bedpans. So it's a dilemma for me as well. Now, this psychedelic thing only indirectly feeds into that, because what it is it does carry you deeper into the experience of being a human being. And for whatever that's worth, that feeds back into the project of compassion. But I cannot imagine a spiritual hierarchy where we would determine the most enlightened among us by seeing who had taken the largest number of hits of LSD or psilocybin. I mean, that's silly. Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt, but my hand went up anyway.
Well, you and Dr. Strangelove.
I'm faced with a little dilemma. It would be nice to have you continue with this fascinating discourse, or can we have that, plus something where we can experience something of a shamanistic nature this side of the membrane that you spoke about earlier?
Well, if you mean, am I about to draw out a little glass pipe and send you into the howling maelstrom of the Mandelbrot Tao, we could do that, but only once. I said to somebody last after some of you left, after the official thing was over, we were talking about Salvia Divinorum, which is currently legal and which in fact would provide that experience. I think before I start turning people onto it in these workshops, I'll have to huddle with the Esalen management. But in terms of the laws of the civil state, it's now legal. And so there is, if any of you are therapists working with substances, who knows how long this door will remain open. But here is a perfectly legal avenue. And I've wondered what we should do about it. I've thought, you know, I could bring Salvorine Alpha, and we could turn someone on and carry them through it, and all watch one person go through it and then analyze it. But, you know, it's fraught with the possibility of complications. Just because it's legal doesn't mean any of the real issues have been dealt with. I've also thought it could therefore be done on stage. You know, you could do it as a performance. But again, I'm not sure we want to draw a lot of attention to this. Yeah.
The reason I asked that, I met someone in the hot tub this morning who was attending another workshop of a shamanistic nature. And he said it was experiential, involving music and dance, something related to that. So that's what I had in mind.
Oh, okay. Let me address that then. Here we come to one of the great bifurcations in theories about what shamanism is about. And you can believe anything you want and have great experts that you can call to your side. Mircea Eliade, who wrote Shamanism, the Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy, which is the definitive text on shamanism as a worldwide phenomenon, took the view that use of plants was decadent, that the true shaman attained, whatever that means, attained the ecstasy through fasting, ordeals such as flagellation or hanging on hooks from pectoral muscles, or something like that. And that when a culture reaches the stage where, this is Eliade's words, it must resort to narcotic plants, then the shamanism is in a decadent phase. Well, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but if you were interested, you need to know who these people are. And Mircea Eliade was a Romanian educated in France who cut his teeth on yoga in India, spent a lot of time in ashrams, and was brought up in that guru-based European tradition of spiritual ascendancy. Gordon Wasson, Weston LaBarre, and others who've looked at this have reached exactly the opposite conclusion, that shamanism without psychoactive plants is shamanism on its way to slowly turning into religion, and that techniques that recreate the trance through ordeal, through fasting or flagellation or piercing or excessive blood loss or acoustical driving through drumming or exhausting rituals of dancing, that these were shamanisms in transition into religion. Well, so here we have the greats of anthropology in direct contradiction on this. You can decide what position you want to take, and I would recommend that you go to the field and see what is happening. And I guarantee you, the cultures which are most like Paleolithic culture, in other words, nomadic, pre-agricultural, with very limited social hierarchy, without hereditary social hierarchy, so forth and so on, they are largely in the Amazon basin and largely psychedelically inspired in their shamanism. My approach to this is entirely pragmatic. If it works, use it. I've sat and listened and drummed, and it isn't. It doesn't cut the mustard for me. I have talked to people, for instance, in the Harner movement, who were trainers in the Harner movement, and said, just between you and me, let's get our cards out on the table. Is this as good? And they say, no, it's not as good, but it's legal. And so what we have here are people making an accommodation to the state, I think. Sometimes this is on the periphery of yet a related but different question. People always want to say, well, you're such an enthusiast for chemicals and plants. Can't this be achieved on the natch? Isn't this what yoga and meditation and so forth is all about? And my answer again is entirely practical. If you can achieve this on the natch through drumming, mantra, yantra, tantra, great. But most of us can't, and I can't. And what I'm interested is a democratic doorway. I don't believe in spiritual hierarchies. I don't believe that some people can get to the gold and other people can't get to the gold. If it's gold, it has to be available to everyone. And these psychoactive plants are incredible. And they carry, this was a point I was making, this is why we call it meandering. They carry no ideological freight, no theology. When you achieve an altered state of consciousness under the tutelage of Swami so-and-so, an enormous exegetical body of interpretation is waiting to fall upon you. Well, it was a third chakra opening, and it had to do with the manifestation of the Avalokiteshvara, and on and on and on. When you take a psychedelic